organizations, innovators who have got ideas in these three sectors and program in these three sectors, but also we complement that with technical assistance and expert assistance. But on top of that, one of the other mandate that we had as the program, since we started back when innovation was not a buzzword in Tanzania, so we were also tasked in building the innovation ecosystem by working with various partners, innovation hubs that were nascent at then, and some other institutions to basically develop and promote innovation in Tanzania and push forward the innovation agenda. So that what I've been doing. So we've been, as I talk about like the three components of what we do, Inspire, we work with the hubs, the other players within the innovation ecosystem, the youngsters, the youth, by supporting ideas like strategic competitions, awards. Some of them might have known about Mwazo Challenge. Recently, we did one for COVID, which I'm going to touch on later on. So we kind of support those kind of activities that keep the innovation ecosystem vibrant, and also we allow that kind of exchange of ideas on who is working on what, working with the startups and stuff like those. But the bulk of what we do, and that's probably what people know us for, is the funding, which we call Catalyze, where we provide grant funding to relatively more established organizations to implement innovative projects in the three sectors that we mentioned. So far, we've funded about 47 innovative projects, and we've been working with them to look at the sustainability part so they can be able to secure additional funding from either other donors or some source of additional funding. In the last part, we don't just do funding and Inspire, we also collect that kind of information, the lessons learned from the two other components. And we use that knowledge to engage in discussions or knowledge sharing sessions with the development partners and private sector, but also to engage the government in shaping the innovation ecosystem kind of environment in Tanzania. So recently we've been working with the Commission of Science and Technology to see how they can be able to facilitate, regulate, also build the capacity in terms of how they can also manage some funding as far as innovation is concerned. Some examples of what we have been able to achieve over the time. There's quite a lot to achieve. I think some of you know more about innovation ecosystem, Innovation Week, which has been running for the past 6 years now, which keeps on growing. And we are thinking of turning that into some kind of national innovation week, having a national outlook. So we tried that this year by working with the ministry in implementing Makisati in Dodoma. So this year around, we want to make it more seamless so it can actually be just one event rather than two. We have funded or committed about £23 million for over the past 6 years to the 47 projects I talked about. I'm going to touch on some of them, or maybe you have come across some of them that are in your community. We've been working with the innovation hubs, and we mapped a lot of them. Right now, I think we are on 50 in number and counting. And when HDIF started, I think there was only about 2 innovation hubs. So much we don't provide like direct funding to most of them, although we have done that through COSTECH. We engage ourselves in helping them build their capacity, also trying to unify them. So right now we are working on helping them to kind of collectively work towards having a hubs network, which is going to allow them to kind of improve their, have common practices and stuff like those. We've been working with the doing partners to help them shape the innovation program. So very soon, I think we are going to see a number of programs coming up in innovation, and which are going to somehow inherit what we've been doing. But we also do summarize what we do in a number of knowledge products, which some of you might have come across. If you haven't, I invite you to go to our, website, hdif-tz.org. There's quite a number of things that you can actually learn from what we're doing, and you can engage with us through that channel. So these are just some of the examples of the project that we have funded. Maybe you might have known some of them. There is one that came from university, this nanofilter in Arusha. For those people who are in Arusha, you know about this one that came out of research, and now it's actually in the market. It's a product which is doing well in the market, trying to scale, but at least we took it off the ground, and it's actually doing well. And there are also others in still new water. We worked with the local government in Shinyanga to implement this prepaid water solution, which gave access to town Maganzo to access to cheap, affordable and clean water, where they hadn't had kind of service for over 30 years. So this was, I like this project much because it's kind of tested on what partnership can do, because we brokered some kind of partnership between a startup, a tech startup from the Netherlands, and working with the district of Kishapu, and also partnering now with an NGO, and came up with this kind of sustainable solution, which is now working after the funding actually ended. So that's the kind of example that we show that, okay, this kind of partnership can actually work when it's brokered well from the beginning. Some other examples, of course, I'm sure most of you know about Shure Direct. We started with them when they were still small. I'm quite sure this number has now gone up. We haven't updated this. And that came in handy to when it came to now providing access to education during the COVID crisis, when students went home, so they had to rely on this digital platform to continue learning. So that's also one of the projects we are proud of as HDIF as well. And you might have heard of Hero Rats, the rats that detect TB, innovation from a partnership of Sokoine University of Agriculture and an NGO called Apopo, which also provide funding. And they managed to set up a lab in Temeke. For those who are around there can actually see it from the and it's still working. So, and yeah, that's the kind of innovation. For there are quite a number. I talked about 47 projects we funded. We cannot list all of them here, so just pick a sample. And if you want to learn more, you can just go to our website and get some of these documents that we've been able to profile. Some of them talking about how you implement a development project with some guidance, some of them like summarizing what we've been able to do throughout this for the past 5 years, like giving some lessons in investing in social innovation in Tanzania. And others looking at some of the inspirational personalities within the ecosystem, so that you can actually emulate. So that's more or less about HDIF briefly. So I thought I should talk about that before we go into the main subject of the day. Okay, so I had actually forgotten about mentioning that when COVID struck, when we were kind of in the middle of a crisis, we also supported our grantees to respond, but also introduced one challenge that we called HDIF COVID-19 challenge, response challenge. And we managed to fund 6 innovations that were that won. They pitched and won this competition, and they're now actually implementing their own initiatives. So there are quite a number of initiatives that are also taking place in Tanzania, and you can see some of them here. And you might know already or working one of those. And so some grantees also, we help them to kind of repurpose some of the grant to be able to implement initiatives that were responding immediately to the crisis. Like there was a cry about hand washing. So we helped one of the organizations in working Handeni to set up the hand washing stations in the community so they can actually be able to fight the disease. But there are quite a number of responses that took place, like some of our tech grantees we support availing free of charge their content to be available to the students who are at home, or partnering with the mobile network companies to give access to free of charge to the data to use the content. So that has been happening in part of basically repurposing the resources that we have access to to respond to a crisis which strikes. So quickly, when I got this invite to talk about business innovation repurposing in light of COVID, like, well, where do I start from? Because there has been a lot that has been said on this topic, and there is a lot that has been written about, and sometimes it's actually very dangerous when you're given a wide topic like this because you don't even know where to start from, and people might actually know more than what you are going to tell them. Nonetheless, I just picked here and there things that we can just spark the conversation, which we are going to get engaged in here. So don't see this as like, this is actually what I know, what I have. This is just what I kind of managed to pick from here and there, so we can now get this kind of discussion. So why is this discussion very important, especially when it comes to business innovation? I just looked at this survey that was done by McKinsey and Company. This is one of the leading consulting companies, especially in terms of strategy. And they asked executives or CEOs around the world and wanted to know how prepared they are or how they feel about the crisis and what actual impact it's going to have on their businesses, on the industry that they work in. Definitely, which I mean, 90% of them definitely agree that, well, we are not going to continue business as usual, as we see. Most of the businesses have had to change tack to see how they can be able to accommodate. So, and they see this as more like it's a long-term shift because they say that it's going to fundamentally change the way we do business over the next 5 years. Well, the horizon differs from analyst to analyst. So there are some people who say, okay, probably this crisis is actually going to be there for the next 2 years. Others say it's actually going to lead to a paradigm shift altogether. We cannot go back to where we came from. So it really depends on what kind of information to read. 85% of them are basically concerned that it will have a lasting impact on their customers' needs and wants. I think that's given. We are already seeing the kind of shift in consumer behavior. In some countries who are still locked up right now, if you have been in the house for 4 months, definitely you want to be behaving the same way that you behaved before you got locked up. So the kind of service that you get access to, the way you get your services actually changes. And psychologists say that sometimes when you practice a habit for 3 months, it actually becomes permanent. So sometimes you can say why these exactly are a bit worried. As expected, and we can see with some of the companies that we work with probably that when they ask these executives, 21% only felt that they were prepared or they had the expertise, resources, and committed to pursue the new growth successfully. So, which I mean, it was a crash that happened. Nobody was expecting it. And 2/3 of these executives felt like this is actually going to be the most challenging moment in their executive career. I hope that the truth, because you never know what might come next, tomorrow, in the next 1 or 2 years when they're still executives. But nonetheless, this is the sentiment among the business leaders about the impact of COVID and the crisis that it's actually causing. But all of them, or most of them, actually agree that it also presents an opportunity. But it just matters whether you are actually well positioned to take advantage of that opportunity, and that's what we are going to look at, how some of them responded either in positive or negative ways. So this is why the discussion around business innovation repurposing is basically very crucial at the moment. In Tanzania, we might not see it because we are lucky, or rather probably go ahead by that we were not hit as much. But in other countries, and of course, by extension, you also get affected. You've already seen it. For those who are working in the tourism sector, you know what actually that means. Even if we didn't fall sick that much, at least, but our sectors got badly affected because we depend on people from those affected countries. So, when crisis strikes, you just decide on how you look at it. Most as to be business people look at it and say, okay, it's an opportunity, but it all depends on whether. So they say that necessity is the mother of invention. We can get examples from the history where some of the innovations we use today were born out of crisis, either during the Great Depression or during the World War. So the examples are, maybe even for some individuals, they hate uncertainty. So that's really fulfilling. That's unfortunately what COVID has offered them in like large doses. Like uncertainty was hit them by surprise. That's what it is, right? And of course, that hate for uncertainty, what gives some other people like jobs to do. People who are risk management experts, they thrive on this because business don't like uncertainty, so they want to be able to predict it. And unfortunately, no matter how smart you are as an expert, a risk expert, there's no way that you could have predicted COVID happening at this particular time. Well, there are people who say that it was predicted about years ago, giving example of Bill Gates talking about it, but people thought, okay, this is just more of like a rhetorical or something. Nobody took it seriously. That's why we didn't even invest in health system to kind of prepare for it. But as individual businesses, definitely it was unexpected. But others say that it takes a crisis like this to be able to know how creative and innovative you are and how fast you can jump into action. And we're seeing some of the businesses that are kind of taking advantage of it. There are some markets even that were opened that were not there, or maybe that were strengthened because of that. So most businesses were forced to think off their feet and plan and act very fast to respond. Of course, as in any case when a crisis strikes, those who are very slow in responding are left behind, and that's how the world operates. So the laggards are left behind, definitely. So, I don't have to go through all the examples that you have seen, like some people who actually cashed out of this business. For those who are in the corporate, you may see how Zoom business kind of jumped. Became very popular during the crisis. How the tech companies cashed on it from the likes of Amazon and their services and stuff. While others are struggling, but for them it's like, okay, now everybody is out. You have to work remotely, so you only depend on this kind of platform. So that's how the world of business works, unfortunately. And in this kind of crisis, it's survival of the fittest and the swiftest. You already know, some of you may know Charles Darwin, that it's not the strongest of the species that survive, not the most intelligent, but the one that most responsive to change. So this one forced people to change. And if you look at this picture, I think I got it from some website. It's more or less we now coming to terms that we're going to live with this crisis, foreseeable future. People are predicting that the device is still going to be there. It's stabilizing a little bit until like 2022. Those are the scientists saying. We know we can't be sure for that how far it's going to go. But what the message is, we need to find a way of surviving within this crisis. We have to see how we can be able to continue living. People say that, okay, there's no way that we are going to lock ourselves out for forever. It can't work. That's not how human beings are created. We have to be there and be social. But how do we do that and still remain safe and be productive and tend to our needs? That's something that is going to be dictated by how organized we are and how responsive we can actually be. The key thing that has come very clearly is that most companies, if not all, at least those who want to survive, they are having to rethink about their business models. And I would say they have to adapt to the new normal. Some authors are calling this new normal the low-touch economy. Now kind of making reference to social distancing, physical distancing, and characterized by all those things that you are seeing. So how do you reinvent yourself or as a business, or reinvent your business model to adapt to this? Any business model, you're going to say, okay, one, how do you create value? How do you, first of all, even inform the value proposition to whoever you're going to be serving? If you're used to people coming to your restaurant or to your company or to your bank or to class, or for instance, the people that you're serving, the who, how are you going to still get the same service to them now that they cannot come? So here I'm just talking generally from countries which are still experiencing this kind of cry that they cannot move around freely. How are you creating value in terms of value chain? And we are seeing a lot of changes within this line. Like people now say, okay, what do we do? How do we now move from being a brick and mortar kind of business to now being fully digital, which also comes with its own challenges as well. How do we make money? What's the revenue model going forward? Or you can even start thinking, well, who are we actually serving? All right. So how, value, what? So that's something, those are things that to crack their heads to see how do we survive in this environment? And if you fail to solve this kind of puzzle, to look at your business model, you kind of already sign in your death warrant as a business. So unfortunately, that's how scrupulous business world works. So we are seeing a lot of adjustments. Some of them might happen like so that we don't see when you're outside of it, you cannot feel how struggling the businesses are, but they really are. You might ask yourself, okay, how come we're not seeing the banks in Tanzania being affected because they have all published huge profits? Like, how are they doing it when the economy was a bit slow? So, well, I don't have an answer to that. Maybe we should have a conversation with the bankers to see actually how they made it. But yeah, most of them may have had to kind of revisit their business models and see how they can remain relevant. There are some of the examples of COVID-triggered trends and that we have seen. For instance, restaurants elsewhere where they cannot open, some of them came up with some like building compartments, like there are people who cannot survive inside, like I have to go out. So how do we cater for those while still maintaining social distancing, physical distancing, that picture on the left. Like the issue of hygiene and also make sure that the environment is safe, like was really key. People came up with robots that are trained to kill viruses with spray and stuff. We have seen a lot of universities moving now virtual, even going to the extent of doing virtual graduation. We have actually even seen it here as well for the, I think, advocates and stuff, but this is something which is becoming now common in different countries that just attend classes virtually, even attend graduation virtually. So this is something we didn't think about like a few years ago, but now it's a common practice. We are seeing in Rwanda, for instance, medical workers using robots to minimize coronavirus. Like we have also seen that at the airport, where you use robot to kind of take measurement of temperatures, just to kind of keep people safe. But one also the other trend that we have seen happen like quite quickly was how especially establishment in the hospitality industry had to think or told to see how they can adapt. Like in some countries, hotels were converted into hospitals, and they were basically actually assisted by the policymakers this particular profit. But we have also seen it even here in Tanzania, where some hotels try to see how they can use the empty rooms profitably, like offering them for rental for people who cannot work from home, for instance. They can actually work from a hotel room, which has been repeatedly happening right now that even hotels are kind of My apology, I didn't see that I was off. I don't know what happened to the Zoom. I hope you can hear me. If you can, please send a message. Yeah, so I was talking about
we can hear you.
The repurposing of the businesses, especially in the hotel industry, that we saw the kind of hit, and it's something that we're also seeing even here at home, that some hotels had to change. Yeah, thank you. That some hotels had to change their model to offer rooms as temporary offices for people who were having challenges working from home. So that now it's trend that we're seeing. Hopefully, when the hotel industry recovers, maybe that's going to change. So these are just examples of stuff that we funded during our COVID challenge. Like, for some of you know, Zaidi recyclers who are in the recycling business, but for them to come up with the response to the COVID challenge, they come up with face shield made out of recycled materials, and it got quickly approved by TMDA. So this is how business actually can really respond. People are struggling getting the right information at the right time, what I can do. So people use their art. This is from visual art stories, who are using the art to be able to send information in the community on how they can keep safe and also enforce hand washing. So these are some of the examples that we've seen coming up, just responding to the crisis, which is hopefully is going to be a long-term trend. Yeah. Maybe something to kind of look at is the common threat of what we call COVID innovation. So this is adapted from, there's a whole website about the COVID innovations, which I've got a lot of material. So if you have time, just visit the website. So these are what they did, a review of innovators or companies that came up with these kind of solutions, and look at what they have in common. Well, so sorry, I don't know what is happening, but I'm going to try to finalize this. Yeah, apologies again. I don't know what's happening to Zoom. So I was talking about the study that was done looking at the many innovations that came up during COVID, and they look at what do all these innovators have in common, and we look at it more of like agility, but they also had a purpose that we have to serve at least to be useful during this crisis. They look at the quick to care, looking at like, okay, how can we serve these customers of ours who are in crisis? So they just gave like gave a sort of examples of like how each company responded in this sense. Most of them are optimistic and opportunity focused, which is expected. Otherwise, you can just say, you know what, this whole thing is collapsing, so I have nothing to do about it. So I can just be like anyone else and complain and also recoil. We have looked at examples of repurposing resources. You have an established issues becoming redundant because there are no users. So it's just a matter of thinking of your feet to see what else can actually do to intervene. We have given an example of real estate. You are talking, there are abundant examples of how factories It changed from manufacturing cars to manufacturing ventilators, for instance, some countries. Others repurpose their resources from breweries to now manufacturing hand sanitizers. And we actually saw an example here with TBL, I guess, at some point. There are examples of the way drones were being used, for instance, to spray insecticides in the farms in China. Now that we're converting to now delivering services, moving the COVID test samples and also delivering drugs in hospitals. And they say that most of them go where the attention is. I think that kind of applies to some of the examples we looked at here. During the typical crisis, everyone was like, how do we save lives? So whatever you can do to save lives, but also looking at now people, the kind of trends where how they behave when they are home, how can we change our business model to actually cater to their new needs, as now they cannot socialize easily. And they also look at companies that are very quick to experiment with the new ideas. Looking at some companies that had to keep working, like they give an example of Unilever, like how do you recruit people when you cannot meet them? So looking at all the kind of online platforms to be able to still achieve the same thing without necessarily putting people at risk. So these are some of the ideas. So you can also find another resource that talks, classifies them differently, or that talks about this kind of common trait. But maybe just to kind of finalize this presentation of mine before we go into discussions, something to look at. One, if you look at organizations, there's one thing that is very kind of true to some or common to us. How agile is the organization leadership to swiftly steer the boat around in terms of crisis? So the more agile the leadership, top leadership is, I think the more responsive an organization is going to be. Because sometimes you find that leadership probably the one which is being conservative, and then the same organization is going to be very slow to respond, which is common, especially in public sector. I think we have seen, for instance, in if you look around, like to see how different governments responded to the crisis, it all boils down to the leadership, like how there are some where that were very far. They actually saw this is a really a situation that we have to deal with before it becomes too bad, and they kind of managed to curb the threat as they could. Others took it easy, and then they didn't know what to hit them. So now they are having to struggle to tame the results of I won't call it their sluggishness, if I can call it that way. But second, we also have to look at how supportive and agile is the policy regulatory environment. There is an example I read about, especially the article when in China they were repurposing the use of drones. China is a very controlled kind of economy, especially looking at the political economy in the country, but they were giving an example of how very swift the regulators were in allowing or providing licenses for the flight lines for the drones to deliver groceries or be used in hospital delivering test samples of, for instance, because it's another country just like ours where you cannot just fly a drone anyhow. I mean, that's actually the most countries. But what tends to happen for this kind of policy decision to be made, in most cases takes like days or even months, which might not be helpful in time of crisis. But in China, I mean, that's just one example. There are so many others. It was a matter of like days that, okay, you apply for this, as long as you can be able to support, you just get the license. So it's one thing that we can also learn here. Like you might want to support, you might want to do something, you might want to repurpose some of the resources to intervene, but how agile the policy environment that actually can be able to respond immediately. So that's something that we can think about as they continue discussing about this. But I think that's the little I had to share about the business innovation repurposing in light of the COVID-19 crisis, which in some way might feel like it's not that relevant to us because we are not that directly affected, but we actually are if you look at the business environment and how things have been really hard for some businesses. So that's more about it, and I'm going to now respond to some of the questions. If you have submitted any question in the chat box or the Q&A session, you're welcome to put that. Anna, up to you if there is any.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Thank you for a very good presentation and an eye-opener, something which provoke a lot of food for thought, and people try thinking beyond our comfort zone. And we have two questions from, maybe it's one into two, from Chu Donatus in the Q&A box. If you can click there, Joseph. Are you able to see the Q&A box, Joseph?
Yes, I'm seeing that.
Yeah.
I was asking whether the PowerPoint is going to be given to participants. I think that's up to you, Anna, to respond to. And no, the other question is, please, are there any youth? Yes. Are there any youth-led innovative solutions to COVID-19 that promotes the transition to a low-carbon society? Well, I gave one example in my presentation about one that we supported. That's into recycling. And recycling, we know that it's also part and parcel of like reducing the carbon emission and stuff. So that is one, but there are quite a number of, definitely. I haven't searched for those examples of innovative solutions that are youth-led, but yeah, definitely there are quite a number.
Yeah, and there is a hand raised. Can you see that, Joseph? Someone has raised a hand.
Yeah, they can go ahead and ask, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
Ezekiel, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Ezekiel. I'm calling from China. I'm very happy to participate in this conversation, and I'm very thanks to the speaker for the presentations. For my question and my contribution goes to, especially to the presentation. First of all, the presenter talked about a little bit about Tanzania, because we didn't have a lot of innovation, especially in this COVID problem, because we are like middlemen in like business, doing like some small businesses and maybe a few apps and washing tools and masks. But the main question of me is like based on the company that he says he works for, which is HDIF, I think. Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, Ezekiel.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So my question is this: how HIF help the innovation in Tanzania? Because as I know, innovation needs a lot of participants. Like we need government for policy in order to protect the innovation, inspire, and also we need the government for providing the infrastructure and power for innovations. And also we need some training institutions for research, and also we need some training for individuals, like individual person, also to help them to have an open mind and use diversification and health of their mentors in order they can contribute in innovation, and also help them to know the emerging technologies that are now currently in the world. So I was wondering what this company is doing, especially in these areas, because in Tanzania we are having a big problem. Like we are talking about COVID innovation, but I think we didn't have enough innovation this year, not because like we didn't have corona casualties a lot in Tanzania, but we didn't have innovation because these two factors, like I'm saying, the government and also the training, both in the training institution and individual persons, they don't have knowledge, and we don't have policies and other things that will help the innovators to to aspire and to get motivated to innovate new things that will help the community. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ezekiel, and thanks for joining from China. That's quite appreciated. Well, I wouldn't subscribe to the idea that there are no innovators in Tanzania. I think there's quite a lot of progress being made on the innovation ecosystem, and there are quite a number of innovations which are coming up. If you are familiar with the tech space in Tanzania, I think there has been quite some tremendous progress done in there. We are not there yet. We cannot compare ourselves with some other countries which are kind of much developed, but at least we are getting there. So there have actually been some quite exciting innovations that were responding to COVID, and I wouldn't say that they were not there because the ecosystem is not vibrant enough. But it's not that we couldn't talk about all of them right now. So that's one. Second, your second part of the question was basically, well, it's quite wide and talking about the whole innovation ecosystem in Tanzania. And I totally agree with you that it actually takes, I mean, in our work, we said basically it takes a child to, I mean, a village to raise a child, but it also takes an ecosystem to scale innovation, which is quite true because it's not just one program like HDIF to be able to make the innovation grow. We had just contributed to it. But it also takes the government, regulatory environment, the private sector as well, the training institutions, as you rightly put it, to make sure that we shape the innovation ecosystem in Tanzania to make it grow. There have been a lot of outcries about probably the kind of output we get from the training institutions, but we cannot blame them. Like they also have to work with what they get. Right now, the kind of discussions which is going on, especially between the program and working with the Commission of Science and Technology, is to be able to shape what kind of innovation environment do we want to see. Right now, we don't have a comprehensive national innovation framework. The STI policy is under construction right now. They are still working on it. But before we can wait for that kind of policy to be done, what else can we actually be able to do so we can be able to inform every other actors? So that's what actually the Commission of Science and Technology is working on right now. We're still going to be working with them to see whether it can actually come out. We are encouraging them to see what other countries have done and what they're doing. If you look at the National Innovation Framework of Mauritius, for instance, what they actually want to achieve, or go to Rwanda or Kenya, everyone is actually working on that to see, okay, how do we get prepared for the survive or even competitiveness within the digital economy? Because that's actually where we are heading. We are already with evolution, and as a country, I wouldn't say that we are actually best prepared for it. So we have to actually work. So what is very key, but of everyone, but also consider the effort to actually know where we're heading. So we discussion, unfortunately, this to be sure because it was, but we normally have sessions and the status of innovation ecosystem and what each actor is actually looking at the financing, looking at the regular, and also looking at the of development partners who they're also doing. Maybe let me just touch on the questions that have come from here. Do you think we got lessons from the use of innovation for crisis management that would help the development and economic sector leapfrog? Well, it depends on how you look at it. I would say we did. Whether we actually learned something else. Because right now it's a good thing that the information is easily available and easily shareable. We can actually see what other countries are doing. So the second part is whether we are prepared to actually adopt that kind of practices or those innovations leapfrog from. But of course, if you ask me, that would be the best thing to do because as a country, I think we are already late. So we cannot start from where others started. We can just start from where they are right now and probably move forward. So I can't give you a straight answer, unfortunately, that we are actually learning from. We're going to it. It really depends on how we take it.
Yeah, thank you.
How much of what we've learned? Yes.
Okay, just finish that because we also have some few questions in the chat box. So you proceed.
Okay, great. Let me finish on this one from Hatinjao. How much of what we've learned from the current pandemic is being used to create policies to be used to prepare ourselves for the next pandemic? Well, I'm not quite sure. On the global perspective, probably. There are so many countries that are kind of shaping their policies right now based on what actually they saw. So there is a lot of traction on that they are no longer ignoring the scientists, at least because in most countries you find that scientists are not listened to sometimes. But right now, I think we are learning from what we have, what we are seeing. Like some people are kind of, many countries are now investing heavily in the health, their health ecosystem to be prepared for any other eventuality. So that's a wake-up call that we actually need to be prepared rather than responding. In developing countries, I wouldn't tell. I wouldn't say it depends. I think we are, at least the information is available, and we have seen that what can happen if we're not prepared. So I think those are the lessons that we can now put in practice going forward. I'm looking at the questions that came through the chat.
Yeah, I can help you, Joseph. So I've seen two questions from Hillary Duff. Hillary, can you come in and ask your questions? Because the chat box is too crowded and it will be very challenging for Joseph to read all the questions. Hillary, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, we can hear you. Please come in.
Perfect. Joseph, thank you very much.
Hillary, you're muted.
Oh. Hello, is this better now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Perfect, sorry about that. Thank you, Joseph, for your presentation. The first question is connected to some of what youth have shared in the other presentations and the other workshops about how about the importance of creating different enabling ecosystems and to be supported by government and other policymakers when it comes to starting their own small businesses. You were mentioning that policymakers and regulators need to be agile and supportive in order to repurpose innovation. Have you seen Tanzanian regulators or agencies adapt during COVID to support entrepreneurs and small businesses?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have seen a pocket of examples. I think we have one video that talked about in the presentation that at least one of the creation was approved easily for use, like the example of Zaidi recyclers. But outside that single example, I wouldn't say that we actually saw much. So there's actually, it's not just Tanzania, I think it's actually in the different country that the policy or regulatory environment kind of takes long to respond. And that's not something which is very good for when, especially when there's a crisis. Unfortunately, it's not just the regulatory, but even in individual companies, we say that some of that kind of takes time to respond. Then by the time you're ready to respond, the crisis is no longer there or the need is no longer there. So I think it's something that we need to keep on talking about, that, okay, we need to create more of an agile kind of policy environment that can actually very swiftly respond to the current need. Because sometimes you have to go through a whole lot of bureaucracies to get a decision made. And that's the nature of the public services. It's not just about something that we need to look at.
Yeah. Doreen, you have raised your hand for a while now. Please come in and ask your question. Doreen.
Hello. So,
hello.
First, congratulations and thank you, Joseph, for the awesome presentation. My question will be, in the terms of fourth industrial revolution and entrepreneurship in general, we know that like Silicon Valley DA, and I just wanted to know, like, how are you using the opportunity that come with having Silicon Dar? And how are you guys working to monopolize the opportunities with it to actually target the market of East Africa, seeing as how other countries are still in lockdown and they're focusing more on surviving, and seeing as we're already somehow a step ahead, how are we actually, how are you guys as HDIF working to actually making sure we are ready to actually tackle this market that and the opportunity that we might have in this market, seeing as how we have innovations and some of the innovators from Silicon Dar?
Yeah, thanks. The idea of Silicon Dar, it was looking at the location of many actors that are involved within the innovation ecosystem, especially the tech sector. And it's not that something that was kind of intentionally created. So something that organically came about, just looking at along the Bagamoyo Road and looking at where most of the telecom companies are, the hubs and of course the institutions are. So that's one. But what HDIF is doing about it, I'll say that we are working with all the actors within the innovation system. That kind of momentum going, because that's basically what the innovators need and what the policymakers need. This need and this value which is coming up that we need to tap into. Because if you don't use that, you don't keep that momentum going, and by coming up with activities, challenges, meetups, and cross-sharing of ideas, information, then there won't even be any, the policymakers want to actually see that there's something. Has made it possible for the government to actually see this kind of movement coming up, and they are now about it. For instance, it's only until last year that the government came up with this, what they call the max. And that was responsible. Okay, maybe we can do something similar to Innovation Week by touching the grassroots level. So that was the response to what Innovation Week has been doing. So that kind of activity or agitation within the ecosystem is actually what we need to keep us. But as HDIF definitely been funding, I think I talked about some of the examples of projects we funded, which were also providing lessons like how can you innovate within and provide sustainably water saving access to rural populations, for instance. So from there, then we've seen EURA and the government coming up with water utilities need to adopt prepaid water solutions based on actually what we have seen. So that's something that I think is very important for programs like HDIF to be engaged in. Of course, it takes a lot more efforts and make a difference. It's not just one program in which we are addressing. There's one question that I would like to touch, actually two, one from Hillary and the other one from Jeff. Jeff said, what happens to the education sector? What about those who can't afford online learning? That's a very important question. And we actually saw that when the schools were closed for 3 months here. Well, there's some people could have access to the digital platform to keep their kids busy, but for those who are in the rural areas who cannot afford electricity, cannot afford a tablet, what happens to them? That's a big question, especially in developing.
Joseph, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Anna.
Joseph, you're breaking.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear. Now we can hear you. I don't know about others, but I can hear you.
All right. I was addressing Jeff's question about what happens to the education sector if the pandemic goes forever. I mean, it's not clear. I'm not sure, because we actually saw like the manifestation of digital divide during the time where schools were closed. So some kids had access to digital platforms, others didn't. And there is little that we can do about it, unfortunately. But that's a big question to actually ask ourselves when it comes to inclusion in education provision if we decide to move to virtual learning platform. What do we do about it? So that's a big question for the government, definitely. And there's another question about the agencies like TRA, where they did anything to support small businesses. I remember there was quite a bit of discussion that was happening. The Tanzania Startup Association did some study and submitted to the authorities. Where there was some action that were taken, yet to be seen. You know that there's some action that was, some of the recommendations were included in the budget for this year. So the implementation part is something that we need to see whether it's going to take place. Another question is about HDIF, what we supported. How did you specifically see digitization ICT help entrepreneurs change their businesses? Well, I talked about some of the examples about some few of our grantees that use their platform to now provide free access to the content. I can give an example of, for those who are in Tanzania, Ubongo Learning. I can talk about Shule Direct, who partnered with Vodacom and others to provide free access to the content to keep children have access to the material. So there are also other numbers of actually that we didn't, we're not specifically supported by HDIF, but there are also some of them that came through the challenge, like the Mutabi and others who were providing access to their materials to be able to access by kids. So there have been some action within that from what we've supported as well. Others, I think, have commented. Yes. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, no, you can go ahead. I thought we had lost you.
No, I was looking at the other comments. So I'm trying to see whether there are other questions within the chat box. If there's anyone who has raised a pertinent question that I haven't touched on, please let me know.
Yeah, I think you are through all the questions. And just checking if there's anyone who is raising his or her hand or like any burning question before we we have 3 minutes to time, so I can grant at least 1 minute. Yeah, but yeah. So yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. A very good presentation. Provoking one. When you're presenting, really, even from my side, I was really thinking how best can repurpose innovation to really meet the youth demands and needs. And I think that's something we like the people or companies who are in the innovation ecosystem really need to. Even when you are innovating or repurposing innovation for any population, really, it's important for their to take into account the needs of the population you are targeting. So thank you very much. And I think for me, like the key message I want to make sure that we go with it as a take home or a homework is really now start thinking on how best, not only in the COVID, but in any circumstance, how well we can repurposing our innovation. At the end of the day, meeting the same objective about profit making, or if it's about reaching a certain group, but really making sure that we are able to address the needs. And so at the end of the day, we have like a win-win situation. So thank you very much. We should be able to share these presentations. Actually, the organizers will contact you, Joseph, and then we'll send to participants. So for those who want to have Joseph's presentation, please share your name, email, so that the admin will be able to hear the presentation. Otherwise, I wish you a good evening, and I look forward to see you tomorrow in our tomorrow's session. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I'm happy we had people even from the outside the country. Yeah, so thank you for your time, and I look forward to see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much, and apologies for the technical challenges. Have a good evening.